Hello, and thank you for clicking on my video. This is a continuation of the last video I posted on this channel talking about the Field Training Officer Program. And we're going to pick it up in just a few minutes at the point where you get in the patrol car and you're getting ready to handle your calls. But before we do that, I wanted to spend a few minutes giving you some life advice, and don't hit the pause button. Just hear me out, because I think the information I'm going to give you is one day going to be very beneficial. So some years ago, I lived with my grandfather, and he had a working ranch, and so we had to wake up very early in the morning, even before sunrise, and we had to do a lot of work related to the ranch, feed the animals, do other chores that we had to do before going to school. And it was a hard life. I mean, it was very hot days, sweaty days. It was something that actually made me not want to become a farmer. And so one day I was sitting with my grandfather, and we were having this conversation, and he was talking about the difference between some careers, and specifically how some careers, like farming, you create a product and you take it out to the market, and hopefully the market pays you the price that you want to get for that product, or you don't make the money that you thought you were going to make. And so he was talking about specifically sales jobs, and how some sales jobs, you basically have to go out and sell a product, and you have to have the customers who want the product. And if the customers don't want the product, and then you have all this product, you have to lower your prices. And so you really don't get too far if that's the type of career you have. And so it made me question what he was saying, and I didn't realize it until I became a police officer later. And so let me just hear me out for a few more minutes, where you basically, as a police officer, I came to work, and work was waiting for me. Basically, crime produces work. People are out there committing crimes, having domestic violence attacks, you name it. Burglaries are happening every day, thefts, battery assaults, traffic accidents. Police officers are guaranteed to have a lot of work every day. And so ideally, if you want to become very wealthy and independent, ideally to me, you get a job in law enforcement where you have a regular paycheck, where you have a guaranteed salary, where you have retirement, where you have medical benefits. And then on the side, on your days off, you can start a second business. You can start, maybe if you're listening to this and you say, but Brian, I want to become a salesperson. Well, then go become a salesperson on the side. A lot of firemen have learned this early on. A lot of firemen work 7 24-hour days in a row, and then they have like 10, 15 days off. And so I remember this group of firemen years ago that started a pool digging business. And so they were making more on the pool digging business. But again, that's not a yearly thing on top of their salary. And so when they retired from the fire department with full pay and benefits and medical benefits, etc., they continued with that pool digging business. And so I'm not here to tell you not to do it. I'm here just to tell you that when I worked as a police officer, I didn't have to go out there and have to find work. Work came to me. So let's get started on the Field Training Officer Program. Last time we talked on this video, I discussed the safety procedures of checking out the car, making sure that there's no evidence that was left over from the last suspect, the last officer that had the shift, that had your car. And so that's very important. So if you haven't watched the last video, do watch it so that you're familiar where we are. And so now for this video, we're going to talk about when you first get into the car. That's when you first log into the monitor data terminal, your computer, the police car computer, and then it's going to show you logged on, and then it's going to show all the calls that are waiting for service. And when I worked as a police officer, I'm only going to share this information with you. Some of you are already working for other departments, and you may be saying, well, Brian, that's not how we do it in my department. Well, listen, in California alone, there's 300 agencies, and they all have different policies and procedures. But overall, being a police officer is pretty much the same in most large police departments, like the one I worked. So back to what I said, you sign up, you sign on the computer. It shows all your calls holding. Now, in my city, the city was divided into 4 commands, so 4 area commands. We had Northwest, Northeast, South, east and southwest. And so I belong to the northwest officers. And so a big portion of my beats that were numbered in the 60s carried a major highway going through there. We also had the mall. We had a lot of business commercials. And so my beat that I worked was one of the busiest beats for the whole city. And I'm not exaggerating. I average about 17 calls on an 11-hour shift. That's how busy it was. We're going call to call to call. And so other areas, other officers that didn't want to work, for that type of caseload, worked other areas of the city because maybe they wanted more time to spend talking to citizens, you name it. Again, I'm not here to tell you that one area is better than the other. I'm just telling you that for my city, the city was divided into fours. And so my beats were all in the 60s, 60, 61, 62, all the way to 67, 68. And so why am I telling you this? Because on the radio, we only had two main channels. And so you had to listen in to what your radio call sign was. My call sign was 61. And so, I look on the screen and dispatch would come on the radio and say, Y61, check your screen for a call. And I go look, and there was bike theft, or there was a burglary call, or there was a traffic accident waiting to be handled. And so I would put myself en route on the computer and start hitting over there. And so a lot of the calls were very much like I just told you, very low profile, not high priority. In the beginning of the shift, it was a lot of calls that have been holding from the previous shift. And so that's what you had to do. Now, keep in mind that a lot of these calls, you would get rerouted. So I'd be going to the bike theft call, and then all of a sudden, Copeland Sports or some other business would call and say, hey, there's a burglary in progress, there's this going on, or whatever. So high priority calls can bounce low priority calls off to the side, put them back on hold, and then reroute you. And I thought I would start with this story because a lot of you who don't like to multitask, this job can really get the better part of you. You can't own the call. It's not like you're getting dispatched to a burglary call, even though it's been waiting there for 2 hours. You can't all of a sudden almost get to the call, and then they dispatch you to a multi-car traffic accident with injuries, and then you're all upset because the dispatcher is sending you in a different location. That's not part of the game here. You have to be very flexible. You have to be listening constantly, not allowing distractions to distract you from not listening. Listen for your call sign. Be very flexible. And so let's talk about priorities. A felony in progress is a priority 1. An alarm call at a residence is a priority 6. I mean, think about it. Priority 1 is the highest one. Priority 6 is the lowest one. Again, for my department, don't kill me on the comments because your department's different. And so understand this, because priority 1 calls dictate how you respond, lights and siren, or how you don't use lights and siren. If it's a low priority call, you do not use lights and siren. You pretty much go there at the flow of traffic, and you'll get there as soon as possible. But you have to obey all laws. You can't be blowing through red lights and that kind of stuff. So very important that you keep this in mind, because when you're a trainee in the field training officer program, as a field training officer former, I would tell you that I'm going to be watching you to see how you're going to be able to adapt to changing conditions. So if we're going to the low priority call and you're all relaxed talking to me about whatever, how you planted flowers in your garden, and all of a sudden shots fired, somebody's getting stabbed, somebody's getting robbed, bank robbery in progress, something very major, all of a sudden I'm going to be watching you to see if you can adapt from, we're having a conversation about flowers. Now you're listening in for the call, because now you're going to have backup officers. If you're the primary officer, you're going to be routing other officers. Where do you want them staging? What area do you want to control? Because you're going to be in charge. The first police officer who gets dispatched to the call, he or she is in charge of that call. And so he or she has the ability to route people to that call. Very important. You have to kind of be able to kind of take charge. And then let's just say that before you get to the call, it starts getting escalated, or de-escalated, right? Let's just say that the officer got there, it's unfounded, whatever. You have to kind of go back down. And so you have to master what I just told you. You have to understand what the layout of your city is, what is your beat boundaries, you know, what does your department expect you to do if you get involved in a car pursuit? How long is that going to last? You know, do you have to constantly be telling him about the speed and what's the car wanted for, or whatever? Or some departments are so worried about liability that they're basically shutting you down when you start a pursuit because they don't want you to hit innocent civilians, which a lot of times happens, unfortunately. So back to my original point is, you're starting your shift with the mindset, okay, with the right mindset, that you are going to work, you're going to handle these calls. You're not at home on your couch watching TV. You're not hanging out with your family. You're not hanging out with your friends. You're not checking your text messages like you would normally do if you were hanging out at Starbucks or something. You're on. I mean, this is your moment. You have to be fully on, and you have to be fully alert on what is happening. You cannot make a mistake when you're in field training officer program and not expect a huge fallout to happen. So one more thing, a few more things I want to talk to you about, but for this one is backup officers. If you get dispatched to a dangerous type of call, dispatch will assign you a backup officer. Never, ever, 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 and I know some of you know me, you're cracking up right now, never cancel your backup officer. Like never, as in like never cancel your backup officer. You hear these cocky officers come on the radio, and then they'll tell dispatch, hey, go ahead and cancel the cover, I'll handle this. And then I've been a police officer for a while, and I would also hear them on the radio 10 minutes later, dispatch, send me help. And I would be like cracking up, because I would think, why did you cancel the backup officer? Because they thought, hey, I can take this. This is my call. This is my beat. You know, officers tend to kind of take ownership for what they've been assigned. But we are not in this type of job to get hurt. We're not in this type of job to get killed. We are in this type of job to be public servants. And so when you get dispatched to a call and dispatch tells you to stage or assigns you a backup, you take that backup, okay? You take that backup. You maybe meet with the backup before you guys go in to the call, right? What's the plan? Who's the contact officer? Who's the cover officer, right? If you're the contact officer, you are contacting the person on the call, and you're keeping an eye on them, but the cover officer is just keeping an eye on you and the person you're talking to. That's their only job, is to just cover you in case something goes bad. They're gonna pull the weapon, you know, protect themselves, protect you, protect the citizen, etc. So anyway, very important, never, ever, ever cancel the backup, okay? Always let the backup come to your call, and then if everything is calm, everything's mellow, there's no need anymore, then you can tell the backup, hey, you can clear, and then let him go to the next call. Remember, once you clear him or her, they're going to get assigned to another call, and so now it's going to be much harder if later on you need them, that they're on the other side of town. It's going to take 15 minutes for them to get to you. So don't be cocky. Keep the backup officer on your call if there's even a slight possibility that there's going to be problems handling the person on the call, okay? That's number one. Number 2 point that I want to make is that you are a police officer. You are a deputy sheriff. You are a California Highway Patrol man or woman, and you are not a doctor, and you're not a paramedic, and you're not an EMT, and you're not a fireman. And why am I telling you this? Because I would see officers get to a call, and they're kind of lazy. They belong to the L unit, right? L stands for lazy. And they would ask, anybody injured, anybody injured, anybody injured? And they would get on the radio if everybody said no, and they would cancel the ambulance. A lot of them was straight up laziness. They didn't want to take this call. If there's injuries on a traffic accident, you're required to do a report. Most departments want you to do a report. But if they can ask the person, hey, is anybody injured? Everybody says no, then they get on the radio and they cancel the ambulance. I got to tell you right now, as a former training officer, never, ever, ever cancel the ambulance. Never, ever, 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 ever cancel the ambulance. Why? Well, let's talk about what happens if you don't cancel them. If you don't cancel them, they get on scene and they ask, is everybody okay? Anybody injured? They say no, no, no. and then they say, does anybody need to go to the hospital? Does anybody need medical attention? They say, no, no, no. And then they pull out a form and they sign the form releasing their liability and your liability as well, because you're there with them. So if the person later on falls over and dies because of a traffic accident, you have something in writing that they decided they didn't want medical attention. So you're covered, and the EMTs are covered, and the fire department's covered. But if you're the cocky officer who gets on scene and he hears the ambulance coming for a fender bender, and you decide to get on there and say, hey, go ahead and cancel the ambulance, and later on that person starts talking to you and starts throwing up blood, or they have internal injuries that will cause them to die, you will get sued. I assure you, you're going to be brought into court, and some defense attorney, private attorney is going to be tearing you apart on the stand, asking you what type of medical training you've had, and the answer is going to be none, and your city, your county, your state agency is going to be on the hook for that type of call. Okay, so those are the 2 points that I wanted to make. The other point that I want to make is that this job of being a police officer, being a public servant, requires you to do a lot of reports. But majority of these reports are repetitive. I mean, they are all pretty much the same, with different names, different locations, different times, and different property, and different injuries, etc., right? So if you handle a minor fender bender, after you handle 4 or 5 of those, you realize that that report is just like any other minor fender bending traffic accident, and you can do that in like 20 minutes, right? If you handle an assault with a deadly weapon, right, 245A1 of the California Penal Code, next time you handle a 245A1, it's going to be pretty much the same as the first one, and it repeats for burglaries, petty thefts, assault and battery, you name it, right? Why am I telling you this? Because the job requires you to do a lot of reports, and so a lot of officers, they want to get in for the excitement, but they forget that you have to document your activities, right? You cannot simply go to these calls and shake people's hands, draw your gun at times, tell people to get on the ground with a bunch of profanities, and then expect that you don't have to do a police report, right? And so that's another point that I want to make, is that you need to learn how to write reports early on, right? So after you're done with your first shift, some of you think, well, I'm going home. I say you should use some of this free time to go into records and start reading through some of the best police reports ever written. And the people in records, the people that work there are just wonderful. They will tell you which officers write the best and most detailed reports. And so your homework is to start going in there and then reading some of these reports, so that your report eventually becomes a combination of a group of officers who have demonstrated high skills at report writing. Okay, so that's very important. And the last point I'm going to make on this video, we still have a few minutes left, is the body cameras, right? When I first started in law enforcement years ago, we did not have body cameras. But when I left, we had microphones and we had cameras in the cars, and we didn't even have the body cameras yet, but we were going in that direction. But my last department that I worked for as a reserve officer, we did have cameras, and we had a recorder, a microphone on our uniform, and every time we'd make a traffic stop, it was recorded and it was sent via wireless internet to the agency, right? So when a citizen would call in and want to make a complaint on you because you were rude to them, you basically, the supervisor would be able to pull up your traffic incident, your traffic stop, and see if you in fact were rude to the person or not. And so why am I covering this? Because today, in 2020, body cameras are a real deal, right? And body cameras are now part of your investigation. So before you write a police report, you should be reviewing your body camera footage, so that when you write a report, it matches with your body camera. Do not think that you remember exactly as things happen, because you and I both know you're not going to remember how things happen exactly, right? Some of us forget what we had for dinner 3 nights ago, or even last night, or what do we have for breakfast? So you have to kind of pause and think, what did you have for breakfast today, right? So in law enforcement today, body cameras are a real thing, right? Some of you, and I know some of you are listening to this, you feel a bit apprehensive because, like your department sometimes allows you to mute the camera or whatever. You got to be thinking about, before you mute the camera, why are you muting the camera? Is it because you're doing something you weren't supposed to do? I'll give you a corrupt officer interaction that I had when I first got hired as a police officer and was released onto patrol. Is I was dispatched to back up another officer at a traffic stop. And so we did not have body cameras, but today you guys do. Anyway, pay attention. So I get there, I pull up behind the officer, it's nighttime, I turn off my headlights, I leave my parking lights on, I walk up there, the officer is sitting in the driver's seat, and the suspect is sitting in the back rear seat in handcuffs. And he apparently made a traffic stop, so he's calling me to go help him out. No problem, I'm the backup officer. I get there, I say, hey, how's it going? How can I help you? He says, hey, I need you to go up there and I need you to get probable cause as to why I pulled over this car. And I want to remind you, in California, it's pretty much the same in most states, you need to have the probable cause to pull over a car before the traffic stop, before you turn on your lights, before you turn on your siren, before you contact the driver. You have to have a reason as to why you're contacting the driver. And in this case, I'm on probation. This is a veteran officer. And so I had to ask him again because maybe I thought I didn't understand what he was asking. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were saying. Can you repeat? What do you need me to do? You need to go get some paperwork? What? He goes, no, I need you to go over there and find some probable cause as to why I pulled over that car. And so I decided at that very moment that I wasn't going to be part of that corrupt scheme. And so I walked back to my car and I logged myself back in service and I left. And that officer confronted me about 3 months later. You know, he came up to me and he said, hey, what's your problem? He said. And I said, what do you mean, what's my problem? You know, and because I wanted to see what he would say, right? You know, and he goes, you know what I'm saying? I said, no, I don't know what you're saying. And then he finally said it. Remember the traffic stop 3 months ago? I called you to back me up. I wanted you to help me out, and you just freaking left me there, you know? And I basically told him without even giving him an answer, I said, let me tell you something. I'm a peace officer, public servant who follows department policy. So department policy says you're supposed to have probable cause before you make the traffic stop, not afterwards. So don't ever put me in that position again, okay? And so he kind of, stepped back. He was a much bigger guy than me, right? He stepped back, and that was the end of that, right? So from that point forward, we were very on a professional basis. I came to work. I still work with him. He backed me up on some calls. I backed him up on some calls. But he knew I had drawn the line as to how far I could go as a peace officer. So this brings me into ethics, right? And we're going to finish this video in about 40 seconds, so don't turn it off yet. You have to decide early on in this job if you're going to be an ethical officer, right? You have to decide if you're going to be an ethical officer. And the example I used in my previous video about taking the pin back to the watch commander, that's ethics. That's what ethics is all about. The example that I used about returning the penny, like writing a property sheet because the suspect had a penny, not throwing it away, that's ethics. The second you start making some little minor adjustments in your ethical compass is when you get in trouble, right? Once you cross the line, it's hard to come back from that. So if you're going to become a public servant, and I know this is probably a long video for you, you have to decide early on who you're going to be. And if you're a good guy, which I hope you are, you're going to follow department policy and you're not going to bend the rules, right? At the end of your shift, you're going to fuel your car regardless how tired you are. At the end of your shift, you're going to book the evidence regardless how tired you are. You're not going to take evidence home or leave it in your locker. At the end of your shift, you're going to finish the reports that you're supposed to have done before the end of your shift, right? And so these are tips that people most often don't hear in the police academy. You go to the police academy, you're there to learn about laws and crime elements and how to take somebody down and how to, ram somebody off the road, how to do all kinds of stuff. But the things that I'm telling you in these videos are often not explained because no one wants to talk about this. No one wants to say that if you cancel an ambulance, there's going to be liability, right? No one wants to say that if you, write a report and then later on the defense attorney asks you for the transcript of your body cam, that all of a sudden you will have found yourself lying on the stand. That's considered perjury, and then you lose your job for that. So I'm going to stop right here on advice. I'm going to continue giving you the advice, but I want you to be thinking about this, right? Think about why you want to get into law enforcement. I love catching bad guys. I love going out there and really making it the most I can make it. And so I enjoyed going to work every day, and there was lots of work to do every day. And every day was an adventure. I mean, every day you contact different people. Some days are quiet, other days are very busy. Some days are chaotic, other days are mellow, right? But I loved it. I loved it. And I tell my students every day, to the point where at the end of the shift, I was sad to go home and have 4 days off in a row. We were working 4 days on, 11-hour shifts, and then 4 days off. So think about this. So it was a great job. It is a great job. And so if this is something you want to do, pay attention to my advice. Go out there and make it happen. Okay? Go out there and make it happen. I'm going to give you a sneak peek at the location where I'm at. It's one of my favorite places. I just had to, get out of the office and drive here. And I'm going to show you how much I love this place. But I hope some of you that actually stayed here until the end of the video will enjoy this. And so this is my view from the car, right? I love hanging out by the water. I love relaxing, enjoying just the view, nice breezes, etc., right? And I hope that if you're the type of person like I am, enjoying the fresh air, the ocean, that you too are going out there and finding your favorite spots and relaxing and enjoying yourself, right? So thank you for listening. Continue sending the questions my way. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell so that you get notified of any new videos when they come up. Share these videos with somebody who may need your help and guidance, right? Again, my goal is to make sure you successfully pass the field training officer program, and that someday you're off probation, someday you're wearing the badge, you're enjoying your life, and one day you get to retire with your full pension, and you'll look back and you think about Brian and you'll think, man, some of the stuff that guy told me was like right on the money. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to talk about when you come back is going to be internal affairs, because part of you understanding how important it is to be ethical and the training officer program is what internal affairs, what their job is, so that you don't confuse what a police officer is versus what a internal affairs and IA person does. So stay tuned and stay out of trouble and continue sending the questions, and I'll talk to you soon.